Good day, ladies and gentlemen. For today's topics, we have markup based on cost, markdown, and markup based on selling price. And lastly, we have converting markup based on cost to markup based on selling price and vice versa. So let's start first with markup based on cost. In our study of the income statement, we learned that the difference between the sales, selling price, and the cost of goods sold or cost of sales cost is the gross profit or margin, which is also the markup that we have just learned in my previous videos, which you can always check out. So for our first example, we have sales selling price, which is at 450 reals, and for the cost of goods sold or cost, which is at 300 reals, and for the gross profit or markup, which is at 150 reals. So let's say, for example, me, the seller, who bought a product at 300 reals and resold it for 450 reals. So my markup or gross profit is going to be at 150 reals. And for our second example, the markup in percent could be expressed as either based on cost or based on selling price. Markup is based on cost if cost is taken as 100%. It being the base as such to express the markup in terms of percent based on cost. So as you can see, the formula down there shows rate equals percentage divided by base. So selling price as percent of cost equals selling price divided by cost. And for markup as percent of cost equals markup divided by cost. So you might be asking how. Don't worry, I'll show you the solution. So as you can see here, for our solution, we have 450 divided by 300, since 300 is going to be our base. So 450 divided by 300 is going to give us 1.5. And if you convert 1.5 to percent, it's going to be 150%. You just have to move the decimal point 2 times to the right and add a percentage sign. So 150% is going to be our selling price percentage. And to get the markup percentage, we have to divide 150 by 300, which will give us 1 half. And if you convert 1 half to decimal, it's going to give us 0.5. So 0.5 in percentage is 50%. So 50% is going to be our markup percentage. Shall we go back to the example? Let's go. So as you can see here, our selling price percentage is 150%. And for our markup percentage, it is 50%. And 300 is 100%. And now for markup based on selling price or margin. In most instances, however, is expressed as a percent of selling price. In this case, the selling price is the base, hence 100%. So for our first example, we have the selling price at 450 reals and the cost at 300 reals and the markup at 150 reals. So you might be asking, where did we get this 66.67% and the 33.33%? So for our formula here, rate equals percentage divided by base. So cost as percent of selling price will give us cost divided by selling price. And for markup as percent of selling price will give us markup divided by selling price. So for our solution here, we have 300 divided by 450, which is our base, will give us 2/3. And if you convert 2/3 into percentage, that will give us 66.67%. And for our second solution, we have 150 divided by our base again, which is 450, that will give us 1/3. So if you convert 1/3 into percentage, that will give us 33.33%. So shall we try another example, guys? Let's say me, the trader or seller, therefore wants a 30% markup based on selling price. If I deduct 30% from 100% to get my cost as a rate of selling price, which equals to 70%, so that I can determine my selling price. So let's say that my cost is at 200 reals. Again, guys, we are trying to find the selling price and the markup. So let's take a look at our formula to get the selling price. B equals percentage divided by rate. So selling price equals cost divided by 70%. So what is my cost again, guys? It's 200 reals. So 200 divided by 70% or 0.70 will give us 285.71 reals. And for our markup, which is at 30% of selling price, therefore markup equals 30% times 285.71 reals will give us 85.71 reals. And now let's proceed to markdown. So let's say that me, the seller or trader, decided to lower down the price of my product, which was at 450 reals to 400 reals. I lowered down the price of my product so that it could be more affordable and to increase my sales. So this process is called markdown. Again, why is it called markdown? Markdown is the difference between the original or old selling price and the new selling price. So as you can see there, it says markdown equals old selling price minus new selling price. So 450 reals minus 400 reals will give us 50 reals of markdown. So if we write it down, old selling price equals 450 reals, which is at 100%. And the new reduced selling price is at 400 reals. And the markdown is at 50 reals. So you might be asking, how did we get this 88.89% and the 11.11%? So as you can see down there, the formula shows markdown rate. So percent of new selling price equals markdown divided by new selling price. So you might be asking, how did we get the new reduced selling price percentage? So as you can see in the formula, the new selling price divided by the old selling price. So 400 reals divided by 450 reals will give us 88.89%. And now let's go back to our markdown rate formula. So percent of new selling price equals markdown divided by new selling price, which equals to 50 reals divided by 400 reals equals 1 over 8. So if you convert 1 over 8 into percentage, that will give us 12.5%. But the markdown rate can also be expressed as a percent of the old selling price. In this case, the old selling price becomes the base. So the markdown rate, percent of old selling price equals markdown divided by the old selling price. So 50 reals divided by 450 reals will give us 1 over 9. And if you convert 1 over 9 into percentage, that will give us 11.11%. And for our last and final topic, which is converting markup based on cost to markup based on selling price and vice versa. So I want you to take a look at these formulas. So if you're trying to find the markup based on selling price, all you have to do is get the markup based on cost and divide it by 100% plus the markup based on cost again. And if you're trying to find the markup based on cost, all you have to do is get the markup based on selling price and divide it by 100% again minus the markup based on selling price again. So let's take a look at some examples. So we have selling prices at 480 reals, 845 reals, and 1,200 reals. So the cost for these selling prices is 360 reals, 700 reals, and 275 reals. So the first markup is at 120 reals, and the second one is at 145 reals, and the third one is at 925 reals. So you might be asking, how did we get the markup based on cost and the markup based on selling price? So all you have to do here to get the markup based on cost is to divide the markup by the cost, which will give you 33.33%, 20.71%, and 336%. And to get the markup based on selling price, all you have to do is divide the markup by the selling price, which will give you 25%, 17.6%, and 77.08%. And here are some examples for markdown. So for our original selling prices, we have 300 reals, 89.70 reals, and 1,000 reals. And for our new selling prices, we have 280 reals, and 78 reals, and 700 reals. So to get our markdown, you just have to minus the original selling price by the new selling price, which will give us 40 reals, 11.70 reals, and 300 reals. And to get the markdown rate, all you have to do is divide the markdown by the original selling price, which will give you 12.5%, 13.04%, and 30%. And now let's take a look at some converting problems. So for our first problem, which is markup based on cost, which is 60%. So we are looking for the markup based on selling price. So if you remember our formula, all we have to do is to get the markup based on cost, which is 60%, and divide it by 100%, plus the markup based on cost again, which is 60%. And that will give us 37.5%. And for our second problem, we are missing the markup based on cost, but we have the markup based on selling price. So if you remember our formula again, all we have to do is get the markup based on selling price and divide it by 100% minus the markup based on selling price again. which is 45%. And that will give us the markup based on cost, which is 81.82%. I hope you liked the video and found it interesting. Please leave a subscribe button and thank you for watching.